September 20th, 1944, Arracourt, France. The dense morning fog that had grounded most Allied aircraft was finally lifting when Major Charles Carpenter spotted them through his windscreen, a formation of German armor advancing across the open fields toward American positions. His hands instinctively tightened on the control stick of his Piper L-4 Grasshopper, an aircraft never designed for the reckless audacity he was about to attempt. Some people around here think I'm nuts, but I just believe that if we're going to fight a war, we have to get on with it, 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day. These words, spoken to a Stars and Stripes correspondent just days earlier, perfectly define the philosophy of the man who transformed an unarmed observation plane into one of the most unlikely tank destroyers in military history. The former high school history teacher from Illinois had mounted 6 bazookas directly onto the wing struts of his fragile aircraft. What the German tank crews couldn't possibly know was that their 45-ton Panthers and 57-ton Tigers were about to face their most improbable adversary, a fabric-covered plane weighing barely 1,220 pounds, flown by a pilot the Germans would soon come to call the Mad Major. The mathematics of the engagement defied all conventional logic. The L-4's 65-horsepower Continental engine generated less power than the cooling fan on a Tiger tank. Its top speed of 85 miles per hour was slower than a Panther could traverse its turret. Its cotton fabric skin could be penetrated by a mere pistol round. Yet by the end of that September day, 2 Panther tanks would lie smoking in the French countryside, their crews stunned that they had been destroyed by what looked like a civilian training plane. The Battle of Arracourt represented Germany's last major armored counteroffensive in Lorraine. General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army had assembled a formidable force, 262 tanks and assault guns, including the elite 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, alongside the veteran 111th Panzer Division. These units fielded 107 Panthers and 75 Panzer IVs, supported by 80 assault guns, a powerful, organized force intended to halt General George S. Patton's relentless advance toward the German border. Among the attacking force was the 113th Panzer Brigade. Hastily formed but equipped with some of Germany's most advanced armor, the Panther tanks advancing that morning represented the pinnacle of German engineering, each mounting a high-velocity 75mm gun capable of destroying any Allied tank at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Their frontal armor, sloped at 55 degrees and 80 millimeters thick, could deflect most Allied anti-tank weapons. Yet these magnificent machines had one critical vulnerability that their designers had never seriously considered. The roof armor measured only 16 to 25 millimeters on Panthers and 25 millimeters on Tigers. German engineers had prioritized protection against ground-level threats, never imagining that their greatest danger might come from above, and certainly not from an observation plane armed with infantry weapons.
German military doctrine regarding observation aircraft had been consistent throughout the war. The L-4 Grasshoppers and similar light planes were considered harmless spotters, best left alone to avoid revealing positions and drawing artillery fire. Shooting at them would only confirm German locations for the Allied artillery observers. This tactical calculation was about to change dramatically. Lieutenant General Walter Kruger, commanding the 58th Panzer Corps, would later assess these new Panzer brigades as having slight combat value due to incomplete training and equipment. The units lacked adequate reconnaissance capabilities, forcing them to advance blindly against the Americans. They were about to encounter something their training had never prepared them for. Charles Men Carpenter was born on August 29, 1912, in rural Illinois, into a farming family that would lose everything in the Great Depression. The divorce of his parents meant young Charles and his siblings often worked on neighbors' farms to make ends meet. Despite the hardship, he excelled academically, earning scholarships to Roosevelt Military Academy in Alado, Illinois, and Center College in Danville, Kentucky. Before the war, Carpenter taught history at Moline High School, where he met and married Elma Fritziel in 1940. They had a daughter, Carol, but war was coming. When America entered the conflict in 1942, the 30-year-old teacher enlisted, was commissioned as a second lieutenant and completed flight training. By 1944, having been promoted to major, he was assigned to the 1st Bombardment Division in France, then transferred to fly artillery support missions for General George S. Patton's 4th Armored Division. His primary duty involved flying reconnaissance and artillery spotting missions in an L-4 Grasshopper, the military designation for the Piper J-3 Cub. He also served as personal pilot for General John S. Wood, the 4th Armored Division commander, which gave him unusual freedom to pursue his own initiatives. The aircraft assigned to him, serial number 4330426, would soon gain a name that played off the famous Rosie the Riveter, Rosie the Rocketer. In August 1944, Carpenter wrote home to Elma, "Lately, I have been taking quite a few chances, but my luck has been marvelous. Yesterday, I got a bullet hole through the wing and hit a church steeple with one wheel. It was very little for what might have happened under the circumstances." His philosophy of warfare was simple and direct. As he told Associated Press correspondent Wes Gallagher, "My idea of fighting a war is to attack, attack, and then attack again."
Carpenter wasn't the first to conceive of arming an L-4. Lieutenants Harley Merrick and Roy Carson had experimented with mounting bazookas on their observation plans earlier, successfully destroying 2 German trucks. But Carpenter would perfect the technique and take it to unprecedented levels. The modification began with 2 M1A1 bazookas attached to the wing struts. Working with ordnance technicians, Carpenter developed a specialized mounting system using plywood backing plates to distribute the weight and recoil forces across the fragile wing structure. Electrical wiring ran from the launch tubes to toggle switches in the cockpit, allowing him to fire the rockets individually or in salvos. Initial tests revealed problems. The M1A1 bazookas, with their 2.36-inch diameter rockets, could penetrate about 3 inches of armor, which was sufficient for light vehicles but marginal against heavy tank armor. Carpenter quickly upgraded to 6 M9 bazookas, firing the improved M6A3 high-explosive anti-tank rockets. These could penetrate 3.9 inches of armor at a 30-degree impact angle, which was more than enough to defeat the thin top armor of any German tank. The complete modification added approximately 106 pounds to an aircraft already operating at its maximum weight capacity. With a gross weight limit of 1,220 pounds and the pilot, fuel, and basic equipment already accounting for most of that, Carpenter had to fly alone. The observer's position remained empty. There simply wasn't enough lift capacity for another person. The aerodynamic impact was significant. The bazookas created substantial drag, reducing the already modest top speed and making the aircraft even more sluggish in turns. The plane that had been designed for gentle observation flights now carried the firepower of a half-dozen infantry anti-tank teams.
The technical challenge of hitting a tank from an L-4 seemed insurmountable. The aircraft had no gun sight, no aiming system beyond the pilot's eye. The bazookas were fixed to fire straight ahead, meaning Carpenter had to point the entire aircraft at his target. The M6A3 rockets had an effective range of about 300 yards, but accuracy decreased dramatically beyond 100 yards. To achieve a hit, Carpenter developed a specific attack profile that would become his signature technique. Starting from an altitude of about 1,500 feet, he would spot his target and begin a corkscrew descent to confuse anti-aircraft gunners. This spiral approach made it difficult for ground forces to predict his flight path and establish an effective lead for their weapons. At approximately 300 feet, he would level out briefly, align his aircraft with the target, then push into a steep dive. The final approach required nerves of steel. At 100 yards, barely 300 feet from the target, Carpenter would toggle his firing switches, sending rockets streaking toward the enemy armor. Immediately after firing, he would pull up sharply, using every bit of the L-4's limited power to climb away from the inevitable return fire. The entire attack sequence, from beginning the dive to climbing away, took less than 30 seconds, but those were 30 seconds of maximum vulnerability. The Continental C-65 engine struggled with the additional weight and drag of the rocket installation. The plane's normal climb rate of 450 feet per minute dropped to barely 200 feet per minute when fully loaded with rockets. Every foot of altitude was precious. It meant another second away from effective small arms range and another moment to plan the next attack.
The morning of September 20th, 1944, had begun with a thick fog that grounded most Allied aircraft. Combat Command A, under Colonel Bruce C. Clark, was holding positions near Arracourt when intelligence reported German armor massing for an attack. Carpenter took off despite the marginal weather, trusting that conditions would improve. When the fog finally lifted around noon, Carpenter was already airborne, searching for targets. Below him, elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade were advancing, a company of Panther tanks moving in formation across open ground toward American positions. The German crews, trained to scan for enemy tanks and anti-tank guns, never considered the small observation planes circling above a threat. Carpenter began his attack run, entering the characteristic corkscrew descent that had become his trademark. The dive was steep, the aircraft shuddering as speed built up. At precisely 100 yards, he fired, all 6 rockets streaking toward the lead Panther. The salvo struck the thin roof armor, penetrating directly into the crew compartment. The tank lurched to a catastrophic stop, smoke pouring from its hatches. Banking hard left, Carpenter climbed away as machine gun fire erupted from the German column. He could hear bullets punching through the fabric skin of his aircraft as he struggled for altitude. Within 30 minutes, he had landed, reloaded, and was airborne again. The second sortie found the German tanks attempting to reorganize. They had spread out, making themselves harder targets, but this dispersion also disrupted their momentum and coordination. Carpenter selected another Panther and dove again. This time, the Germans were ready. Small arms fire filled the air around his aircraft. The distinctive sound of bullets tearing through fabric accompanied him throughout the dive, but his aim remained true. Another Panther was knocked out, its turret crew killed by the blast that penetrated the 16mm roof armor. On his third sortie that afternoon, Carpenter found the surviving tanks beginning to reverse, their advance completely disrupted. By day's end, he had fired 16 rockets total. 2 Panther tanks were confirmed destroyed, the German advance was halted, and the legend of Bazooka Charlie was born. The 4th Armored Division's official history would specifically note his unprecedented role in stopping a major German counterattack.
Before Carpenter's attacks, German military doctrine treated observation aircraft as minor annoyances. Standard procedure was to ignore them unless they presented an immediate threat. Engaging them would reveal positions and invite crippling artillery strikes, a poor tactical trade. This calculation changed completely after word spread about the rocket-armed L-4s. German units began receiving urgent bulletins warning them about American observation planes carrying anti-tank weapons. What had been harmless spotters were now potential tank killers, requiring immediate, dedicated engagement. Carpenter himself noticed the change immediately. As he told a Stars and Stripes reporter, "Every time I show up now, they shoot with everything they have. They never used to bother Cubs. Bazookas must be bothering them a bit." The impact on German operations went beyond the tanks actually destroyed. Tank commanders now had to constantly watch the skies for slow-moving aircraft. Formations had to spread out when L-4s appeared, disrupting their momentum and coordination. Anti-aircraft weapons had to be redirected from protecting against fighter bombers to engaging observation planes. Infantry units were ordered to engage any L-4 with rifles and machine pistols, creating a curtain of fire that made low-altitude operations increasingly hazardous. The 113th Panzer Brigade, which had entered the Battle of Arracourt with 90 tanks, would have only 27 operational within a week. While not all these losses can be attributed directly to Carpenter, his attacks contributed significantly to the psychological pressure that rapidly degraded German combat effectiveness. Tank crews who had felt relatively safe from air attack in poor weather now faced a threat that could appear at any moment.
October 1944 saw Carpenter refine his tactics and increase his effectiveness. Now famous within the Third Army, he was given freedom to hunt targets of opportunity. In that month alone, he was credited with destroying 4 more tanks and an armored truck, bringing his official total to 6 tanks destroyed, including 2 feared Tiger I heavy tanks as part of that tally. On October 4th, Carpenter engaged a column of German armor attempting to counterattack near Chateau Salon. Diving through intense small arms fire, he destroyed a Panzer IV with a direct hit to its engine deck. The burning tank blocked a narrow road, trapping the vehicles behind it and making them easy targets for American tank destroyers. A week later, near Moncourt Woods, Carpenter spotted Tiger tanks supporting a German infantry attack. The Tigers, with their 88mm guns and heavy armor, were the most feared tanks in the German arsenal. Each weighed 57 tons and mounted armor up to 100mm thick on the front hull. But their roof armor was still only 25mm, vulnerable to Carpenter's rockets. His attack on the Tigers required exceptional courage. These tanks were typically surrounded by infantry and light anti-aircraft guns specifically to protect against air attack. Carpenter dove through a curtain of tracer fire, released his rockets at minimum range, and pulled up just as explosions erupted behind him. One Tiger was confirmed destroyed, its ammunition detonating in a spectacular secondary explosion. The impact extended beyond the physical destruction. German tank crews, already stressed by American material superiority, now faced a threat from an unexpected direction. They could no longer park under trees for concealment. The L-4s could spot them anyway. They couldn't ignore the sound of small aircraft engines. Any one of them might be armed. Each mission Carpenter flew pushed the boundaries of both physics and probability. The L-4 was never designed for combat. Its fuel tanks were not self-sealing. A single tracer round could turn the aircraft into a fireball. The pilot sat surrounded by nothing more than steel tubing and fabric, completely exposed to enemy fire. In his letters home, carefully censored to avoid worrying his wife, he hinted at the dangers. After one mission, he wrote simply, "Had some excitement today. The plane has a few more holes, but still flies fine." What he didn't mention was that those holes represented near misses that could have severed control cables, punctured fuel lines, or struck the pilot himself.
Ground crews who serviced Rosie the Rocketer began keeping informal tallies of the damage. After particularly intense missions, they would count dozens of bullet holes requiring patches. The crew chief reportedly told other pilots that Carpenter's plane looked like Swiss cheese after one engagement, yet somehow both pilot and aircraft continued to fly. The psychological pressure was immense. Unlike bomber crews who flew at 20,000 feet, relatively removed from the immediate violence of combat, Carpenter engaged at point-blank range. He could see the individual German soldiers firing at him, and even see the expressions on tank commanders' faces as they realized what was happening. The combat was intensely personal and immediate. Wes Gallagher, the Associated Press correspondent who interviewed Carpenter multiple times, wrote in Liberty magazine that the Major was a legend in an outfit where reckless bravery is commonplace. But Gallagher also noted something else, a weariness in Carpenter's eyes, the look of a man who had pushed his luck repeatedly and knew the odds.
The bazooka installation on Carpenter's L-4 underwent constant refinement based on combat experience. The original mounting system, using simple metal brackets, proved inadequate. The recoil forces would gradually work the brackets loose. The use of plywood backing plates better distributed the forces, but added crucial weight to an already overloaded aircraft.
The electrical firing system presented particular challenges. The wiring had to be routed through the wings and into the cockpit, protected from both weather and enemy fire. Toggle switches were mounted on a simple panel within easy reach of the pilot's right hand. Each switch controlled one rocket, allowing for single shots or volleys. The system had to be reliable enough to function after hours of vibration and extreme maneuvers, yet simple enough to repair with basic tools. Aiming remained entirely visual and intuitive. Carpenter developed his own system of reference points, using the engine cowling, the cockpit framework, and even scratches on the windscreen as aiming guides. He calculated lead angles based on his approach speed and dive angle, compensating for wind drift and the rocket's trajectory. There was no backup system, no second chance. If he missed, he had to climb away under fire and try again. The rockets themselves presented unique challenges. The M6A3 HEAT rounds were designed for ground combat, fired from a soldier's shoulder at relatively stationary targets. Fired from a moving aircraft, their accuracy decreased significantly. The rocket motor burned for only 0.3 seconds, reaching maximum velocity quickly, but then coasting to the target. Wind, aircraft motion, and the rocket's inherent inaccuracy meant that even perfect aim didn't guarantee a hit.
The Battle of Arracourt, where Carpenter achieved his most famous success, represented more than just a tactical engagement. It was the largest tank battle on the Western Front, with American forces ultimately destroying 200 German tanks and assault guns while losing only 25 of their own. The German plan called for the 5th Panzer Army to break through American lines and recapture Nancy, a move that would have threatened Patton's entire advance. The attacking force included some of Germany's best remaining armored units, though many were under strength and hastily reorganized after the disasters in Normandy. The 4th Armored Division, Carpenter's unit, bore the brunt of the German assault. Outnumbered significantly, they relied on superior tactics, better logistics, and innovative solutions like Carpenter's tank-hunting L-4. The division's tank destroyers, artillery, and armor worked in coordination, with Carpenter providing critical reconnaissance and direct attack capability. His actions on September 20th came at a crucial moment. The German advance had achieved initial surprise, and some American positions were in danger of being overrun. By disrupting the Panther Company's attack, Carpenter bought time for American forces to reorganize and bring up reinforcements. His attack wasn't just tactically successful, it had operational implications for the entire battle. The psychological impact of his presence rippled through German ranks. Tank crews who had felt relatively safe from air attack, American fighter bombers rarely operated in poor weather, now had to fear even the smallest observation aircraft. The need to constantly scan for L-4s and disperse when they appeared slowed German operations and disrupted their coordination.
By November 1944, Carpenter had become a celebrity within the Third Army. Stars and Stripes ran multiple articles about Bazooka Charlie. Popular Science featured him in their February 1945 issue as What's New in Aviation? Piper Cub Tank Buster. Liberty Magazine, The New York Sun, and other publications picked up his story, making him one of the most famous pilots of the European theater. But fame came with increased danger. German units were specifically warned about rocket-armed Cubs. Anti-aircraft defenses were reinforced with light guns and additional machine guns, specifically to counter the L-4 threat. Every mission became increasingly hazardous as German gunners gained experience engaging slow-moving aircraft at low altitude. Carpenter's own comments to reporters revealed his fatalistic attitude. "Some people around here think I'm nuts," he said, "but I just believe that if we're gonna fight a war, we have to get on with it, 60 minutes an hour and 24 hours a day." When asked about the danger, he simply shrugged. "My luck has been marvelous." That luck was tested repeatedly. Beyond the church steeple incident he mentioned in his letter home, there were other close calls. Machine gun fire once severed one of his elevator control cables, leaving him with minimal pitch control for the flight back to friendly territory.
Another time, an anti-aircraft shell exploded close enough to pepper his aircraft with shrapnel, miraculously missing both the pilot and critical control systems. His crew chief, whose name has been lost to history, reportedly begged Carpenter to stop flying the rocket attacks. The ground crew had seen too many L-4s return, riddled with holes, or not return at all. But Carpenter continued, driven by a combination of duty and determination that fellow pilots found both inspiring and concerning.
Carpenter's courage wasn't limited to aerial combat. On at least one documented occasion, he landed his L-4 near a battlefield, grabbed a discarded M1 rifle, and participated in ground combat. After destroying a German column with his bazookas, he landed on a nearby road and took 6 German soldiers prisoner, marching them back to American lines at gunpoint. Another incident involved Carpenter landing near a disabled American Sherman tank under German fire. He climbed onto the tank and manned the .50 caliber machine gun, helping to drive off a German infantry assault while the tank crew conducted emergency repairs. His actions that day earned particular recognition from the tank crew, who credited him with saving their lives. These ground combat episodes earned him recognition beyond his aviation achievements. General Patton himself presented Carpenter with the Silver Star, reportedly saying this was the kind of fighting man he wanted in his army. Carpenter would also receive the Bronze Star with Oak Leaf Cluster and the Air Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster. The ground combat episodes revealed something important about Carpenter's character. He wasn't content to be merely an observer or even a flying tank destroyer. He wanted to be in the fight wherever it was happening, using whatever weapons were available. This attitude, while admirable, also suggested a man pushing himself beyond reasonable limits.
The official records credit Major Carpenter with destroying 6 tanks total, including 2 Tiger I heavy tanks among that number, plus several armored cars and trucks. Unofficial accounts, including claims by witnesses, suggest the number might have been as high as 14 tanks destroyed or disabled. The discrepancy likely reflects the difficulty of confirming kills in fluid combat situations where multiple weapon systems engaged the same targets. Nevertheless, the scale of his success was undeniable. Each confirmed kill required extraordinary circumstances to align perfectly. The weather had to be suitable for flying, but poor enough that German fighters weren't active. Carpenter had to locate targets, approach without being shot down, achieve accurate rocket hits on vulnerable areas, and survive the return flight. The mathematical probability of success was minimal, yet he succeeded repeatedly. Consider the sheer technical challenge. He was attempting to hit a 20-foot by 10-foot target, the approximate dimensions of a tank's top armor, while flying at 70 miles per hour from a distance of 100 yards, using unguided rockets fired from an unstable, unarmored platform while under intense enemy fire. Artillery observers who witnessed Carpenter's attacks described them as impossible and insane. The 2 Tiger I tanks Carpenter destroyed represented particularly impressive achievements. Each Tiger cost 250,000 Reichsmarks to produce and required specialized crews trained for months. They were considered nearly invulnerable to most Allied weapons. Yet, they fell to rockets fired from an aircraft that cost the U.S. Army approximately $2,500 and required only basic pilot training to fly.
Carpenter's role extended beyond tank hunting. As an observation pilot and General Wood's personal aviator, he provided crucial intelligence that shaped operational decisions. His ability to fly low and slow, combined with his aggressive reconnaissance style, meant he often spotted German movements before other intelligence sources. His reports influenced several major decisions during the Lorraine campaign. When German forces attempted to concentrate for counterattacks, Carpenter's early warnings allowed American commanders to pre-position reserves and artillery. His detailed observations of German defensive positions helped plan successful attacks with minimal casualties.
The intelligence value of the L-4s was already well established, but Carpenter's aggressive tactics yielded even more information. By forcing German units to react to his presence, shooting at him, dispersing their formations, moving to cover, he revealed positions and strengths that might otherwise have remained hidden. This intelligence work, while less dramatic than his tank hunting exploits, may have been his most valuable contribution to the war effort. The information he provided saved American lives and shortened engagements that might otherwise have become prolonged battles of attrition.
The success of Carpenter's improvised weapon system highlighted a curious aspect of World War II technology. Germany, despite its reputation for advanced weaponry, had no equivalent to the simple, effective L-4 observation plane. The Wehrmacht relied on the Feisler Fi-156 Storch for similar missions, but it was larger, more complex, and produced in much smaller numbers. The American approach, mass production of simple, reliable equipment, proved superior to the German emphasis on technological sophistication. The L-4 was essentially a civilian aircraft pressed into military service with minimal modifications. Yet its simplicity was its strength. Easy to fly, maintain, and repair with basic tools and materials. Germany's tank designers had created magnificent machines optimized for tank versus tank combat. The Panther's long 75mm gun could destroy any Allied tank at ranges where return fire was ineffective. Its frontal armor was nearly impervious to Allied weapons. But this optimization for ground combat left vulnerabilities that simple American ingenuity could exploit. The bazooka itself represented American pragmatism. Developed quickly from a simple concept and mass-produced in huge numbers, it gave every infantry squad anti-tank capability. When Carpenter mounted 6 of them on an observation plane, he created a weapon system that German doctrine had never anticipated and couldn't effectively counter.
As 1944 turned to 1945, Carpenter continued flying combat missions despite increasing German awareness of the rocket-armed Cubs. The Wehrmacht issued specific instructions for dealing with armed observation aircraft, including dedicating anti-aircraft weapons to tracking them whenever they appeared. In December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, Carpenter flew reconnaissance missions in terrible weather conditions that grounded most other aircraft. His reports on German movements helped American commanders respond to the surprise offensive. Though he had fewer opportunities for tank hunting in the poor weather, his intelligence gathering proved invaluable. January 1945 brought renewed offensive operations as American forces pushed toward the Rhine. Carpenter continued modifying his tactics, experimenting with different attack angles and rocket combinations. He reportedly considered adding more rockets, but was limited by the L-4's weight capacity and the structural limits of the wing struts. His last confirmed tank kill came in February 1945 when he destroyed a Panzer IV attempting to defend a bridge crossing. Witnesses described him diving through a wall of tracers to deliver his rockets at point-blank range. The tank's destruction allowed American engineers to capture the bridge intact, accelerating the advance into Germany.
In March 1945, Major Carpenter began experiencing severe fatigue and other symptoms that forced him to reduce his flying schedule. A medical examination revealed advanced Hodgkin's disease, a cancer of the lymphatic system. Army doctors gave him a prognosis of approximately 2 years to live. The diagnosis ended his combat flying immediately. He was evacuated to the United States for treatment, leaving behind Rosie the Rocketer and the reputation he had earned as one of the war's most unusual aces. His war was over, though the conflict itself would continue for 2 more months. The timing of his evacuation was, perhaps, a stroke of fortune. As German forces became increasingly desperate in the war's final months, anti-aircraft defenses became more deadly and numerous. Several L-4 pilots attempting to emulate Carpenter's tactics, inspired by his fame and the promise of a quick kill, were shot down in March and April 1945. The window of opportunity for his unique form of air-to-ground attack had effectively closed.
German commanders had adapted, ensuring that any slow-moving observation plane that lingered near their armor would be met with an overwhelming torrent of defensive fire.
After Carpenter's departure, his famous L-4 Grasshopper, serial number 4330426, was initially kept operational. The aircraft was a tangible symbol of ingenuity and aggression within the 4th Armored Division, and several pilots requested the chance to fly it. However, the unique stress the rocket launching system placed on the fragile airframe, coupled with the immense attention the plane drew from German gunners, led commanders to quickly ground it from combat duty. The era of the single-seat bazooka cub was effectively over. Recognizing the plane's unique place in military history, the Army quickly prepared Rosie the Rocketer for transport back to the United States. It was dismantled and shipped stateside, ultimately destined for museum display. The aircraft was initially shown at an Army Air Force exhibition and was subsequently prepared for preservation. It remains one of the most recognizable and storied light aircraft of World War II. Its presence in museums serves as a testament not only to Major Carpenter's personal bravery, but to the American capacity for battlefield improvisation, the ability to turn a simple training craft and infantry weapon into a lethal, unanticipated aerial threat. The L-4, often overlooked in the histories dominated by P-51 Mustangs and B-17 bombers, performed an astonishing variety of tasks, from courier missions to medical evacuations, to artillery spotting. Carpenter's use of the aircraft, however, elevated the type to legendary status, demonstrating that even the most benign machine could be transformed into a weapon of war when placed in the hands of a determined and ingenious individual.
Upon his return to the U.S. in 1945, Charles Carpenter began what was expected to be a short period of treatment and a quiet retirement. Defying his doctor's prognosis, he entered a lengthy remission. With the war over, the former history teacher transitioned back to civilian life, returning to his home state of Illinois. He accepted a position as a history teacher and high school principal in various Illinois schools, including a long tenure at Orion High School. His students and colleagues knew him as Major Carpenter, a respected educator and a decorated war hero. But few fully grasped the scale of the exploits that had made him famous across the European theater. He was a humble man who preferred to focus on his work and his family rather than his wartime fame. During this post-war period, Carpenter and his wife, Elma, raised their daughter Carol and lived a quiet, stable life, a stark contrast to the months he spent diving through machine gun fire in the skies over France and Germany. The discipline and determination he had displayed in combat were now channeled into his career as an educator and administrator, shaping the minds of a new generation. He remained in contact with some of his wartime colleagues and was occasionally recognized by veterans who had served in Patton's Third Army. But for the most part, his life was defined by the rhythm of the school year, not the roar of the Continental engine or the flash of a bazooka rocket. Carpenter's quiet persistence in his post-war life mirrored his combat philosophy, an unyielding focus on the task at hand, whether it was teaching a history lesson or destroying a German tank. The disease that had cut short his combat career was held at bay for many years, a testament to his resilience. The man who was given 2 years to live lived for another 2 decades, demonstrating a fierce will to survive that was as impressive as his courage in the air.
Despite the grim diagnosis of advanced Hodgkin's disease in 1945, Major Charles Carpenter exceeded his initial prognosis, returning home to his family and his career as a history teacher and school administrator. For 20 years after the war, he dedicated himself to education in Illinois, primarily serving as the high school principal in his hometown of Urbana and later in the town of Orion. He was a quiet, respected figure in his community. He rarely spoke of the war, preferring to let his wartime service remain in the past, a stark contrast to the aggressive, risk-taking Bazooka Charlie persona known to the Third Army. His post-war life was a quiet triumph of resilience over physical adversity. The fatigue and illness caused by the disease were a constant, underlying reality, Yet he managed to maintain a demanding professional career. He and Elma raised their daughter, Carol, and established the peaceful, stable life that the war had briefly interrupted. Carpenter's steadfast determination, the same quality that led him to fly an overloaded, unarmed Cub into intense enemy fire, now allowed him to fight a prolonged, personal battle against cancer. In 1966, after 2 decades of remission and a full career, Major Charles Carpenter's disease returned aggressively. He passed away on March 22, 1966, at the age of 53, and was buried with full military honors. His death marked the end of a life defined by 2 vastly different but equally courageous endeavors: extreme bravery in combat and quiet perseverance in civilian life.
Carpenter's actions were not just an isolated moment of individual heroism. They had a quantifiable, albeit fleeting, impact on military strategy. His modification of the L-4 and his success in destroying heavy armor from the air pioneered the concept of the light attack aircraft equipped with anti-tank infantry rockets. While the L-4 was too slow and vulnerable to remain a viable anti-tank platform in the long term, Carpenter's proof of concept validated 2 key military principles. Top attack vulnerability. He permanently exposed the critical weakness in contemporary tank design. By confirming that the thin top armor of the strongest German tanks could be decisively defeated by a simple heat, high-explosive anti-tank round, he accelerated the development of dedicated top attack munitions and aircraft in future conflicts. The vulnerability he exploited became a central consideration for tank designers and weapons developers in the decades that followed. Improvisation and low-cost solutions. The entire system, a $2,500 plane and 6 infantry bazookas, represented a remarkably cost-effective solution to a high-value threat, the $250,000 Tiger tank. His success underscored the importance of battlefield ingenuity and the capacity of frontline units to rapidly adapt and create effective weapon systems from available components, circumventing slow military bureaucracy. The legend of Bazooka Charlie also played a significant role in Allied psychological warfare. His exploits were widely disseminated by reporters like Wes Gallagher, providing a narrative of American ingenuity and individual heroism that countered the perception of German technological superiority in armor. To the Americans, it was a morale booster, a symbol that the average soldier, even a history teacher flying a glorified kite, could defeat the vaunted German war machine. To the Germans, it was an unwelcome and unnerving new reality that forced a costly reallocation of resources. The technical lessons learned from Rosie the Rocketer were quickly incorporated into post-war aviation development. The fixed-wing rocket delivery method used by Carpenter was a direct precursor to the use of unguided rockets on more robust military aircraft, such as helicopters in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. His method, using the entire aircraft as a gun sight for fixed weaponry, was adopted by pilots of various aircraft types who needed to deliver accurate fire without sophisticated targeting systems. Moreover, the L-4's success demonstrated the importance of persistence in low-intensity air defense. The initial German doctrine of ignoring the L-4s proved to be a catastrophic mistake. Once Carpenter demonstrated the aircraft's lethality, German forces had to commit anti-aircraft resources previously reserved for fighter bombers to tracking and engaging the slow-moving Cubs. This diversion of effort reduced their air defense capability against high-speed Allied aircraft and further slowed their already troubled armored advances. The story of Charles Carpenter transcends the statistics of confirmed kills. It is a profound example of how individual will and adaptability can overcome massive disparities in technology and military design. He saw an opportunity where others saw only an unarmed spotter plane, and with a simple yet structurally risky modification, he turned a liability into a highly specialized, feared asset. His commitment to attack, and then attack again, whether fighting German armor or a terminal illness, defined his life. Major Charles Carpenter remains a legendary figure in the history of the U.S. Army's liaison and observation aviation, a testament to the can-do spirit of the American soldier in World War II.
The story of Major Charles Bazooka Charlie Carpenter and Rosie the Rocketer is ultimately a powerful narrative about adaptability, unconventional thinking, and the relentless courage of the individual soldier. It is a legendary tale of a history teacher who took to the skies in an aircraft designed for leisure and transformed it into a genuine menace to the most feared war machines of the era. The actions of one determined man forced a fundamental, if temporary, change in German anti-aircraft doctrine and provided a crucial tactical advantage during one of the pivotal campaigns of the war. The lessons from Carpenter's service resonate far beyond the specific technology of World War II. His success was not due to superior engineering, but to a profound understanding of the enemy's limitations. He recognized that while German engineers had armored their tanks against horizontal fire, they had ignored the threat from above. By exploiting this one design flaw, with a simple infantry weapon, Carpenter proved that ingenuity and daring could defeat sheer brute force and technological expenditure. The $2,500 plane and its infantry rockets were a practical, lethal counter to the multi-million-dollar armored behemoths of the Wehrmacht. Carpenter's legacy is preserved today through the continued display of Rosie the Rocketer. The aircraft, riddled with the scars of combat, the dozens of patches covering bullet holes, serves as a physical artifact of his extraordinary bravery. It is a humble machine, a stark contrast to the massive bombers and fighters often celebrated in military history, yet it achieved a unique distinction. It was perhaps the least likely, most unexpected tank killer of the war. His personal struggle after the war, living 20 years past the terminal diagnosis, underscored the powerful, unyielding will that defined his character. The man who had flown so low through a storm of tracers and shrapnel, facing overwhelming odds in the sky, displayed the same quiet, tenacious courage in his fight against disease and in his dedicated service as an educator. In summarizing the career of Charles Carpenter, several key points stand out. First, the sheer improbability of his confirmed kills. Two of the toughest tanks, the Tiger I and the Panther, destroyed by a light aircraft whose skin was only fabric, remains one of the most remarkable technical feats of the European theater. His successful attacks were a calculated risk based on a perfect understanding of flight mechanics, rocket trajectory, and tank vulnerabilities. Second, the psychological warfare element was perhaps as damaging to the Germans as the physical losses. The constant threat of a slow-flying, silent killer above forced German armored formations to change their standard operating procedures, increasing stress, slowing movement, and scattering formations, thereby reducing their overall combat effectiveness. Third, his contribution to intelligence gathering was essential. The information he provided to Patton's 4th Armored Division allowed American commanders to react proactively to German counterattacks, saving countless American lives and ensuring the momentum of the advance into Germany was maintained. Finally, the simple fact that a former high school history teacher who enlisted at age 30 became one of the war's most celebrated and unorthodox combat pilots speaks volumes about the citizen-soldier army America deployed. Major Charles Carpenter, Bazooka Charlie, achieved an enduring place in military legend not by flying the fastest or biggest aircraft, but by demonstrating that in the face of immense firepower and massive disparity, individual courage, sharp wit, and a willingness to engage the enemy on one's own terms can make the most profound difference. He proved that sometimes the simplest weapons, wielded by the most audacious hands, can strike a blow that reverberates throughout history.
The memory of the little fabric-covered plane with its 6 rockets, defying the odds and challenging the technological might of the enemy, continues to inspire and astonish.